Hey, congratulations on your new documentary, Resistance. They Fought Back.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
So tell us about this touching story. What originated for you to make this documentary in the first place?
So I was executive producer of the PBS Nova Science series for 35 years. In 2016, while I was still doing that job, my co-director, Kirk Wolfinger, and I were in Lithuania, and we made a film about a group of Jewish prisoners during the Holocaust who dug an escape tunnel and escaped from the Panari killing site, where the Germans and their Lithuanian collaborators murdered 70,000 Jews. And these 80 Jews were brought in to exhume and burn the bodies so that the Germans would not be, they didn't want to be held accountable for their war crimes. But at night, they dug a tunnel, shackled with spoons. And 12 of them succeeded in escaping, using that tunnel to escape. The rest were shot. And they made it to the forest, and 11 of them made it through the rest of the war. And we put this film on the air. It's called Holocaust Escape Tunnel in 2017. And I really wondered why I had never heard of this escape tunnel or any other escape tunnel, or any other example of Jewish resistance during the Holocaust, with the exception of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And I asked Professor Richard Freund, who was kind of my mentor, who was in that film and is in Resistance, They Fought Back. And he said to me, because you haven't made the film yet. And that kind of prodded me to really think about it and to do research on it, and to realize that this was an amazing story of Jewish resistance that had not yet been told for the general public, although it certainly had been published in scholarly works. It hadn't reached the general public. So as you know, a journalist yourself, when you have an amazing story, there's kind of nothing that can keep you from telling it. So that was really the impetus in 2019, and now it's 2024, and the film is being distributed. It's really kind of amazing. I can hardly believe it myself.
I know that is most excellent to hear. Of course, your documentary follows many different subjects. Could you define resistance to us in your words?
Yes, I certainly can. Resistance meant different things at different times of the Holocaust. At the beginning, when the Jews were imprisoned in ghettos, and there were about 1,200 ghettos, they had no weapons, and they had absolutely no idea what the Germans' long-term intent was, to exterminate all the Jews of Europe. Who really could believe that? That would really take a feat of imagination. There were 9 million Jews then. It seemed ridiculous. So no one was thinking of it. So they started off, but in the meantime, they're imprisoned in ghettos. And they started off with what is known as Amidah, which is the Hebrew word for standing up against ways of resisting German oppression, mainly by holding on to their humanity, by cultural and spiritual observance, by acts of charity, taking care of orphans, feeding the hungry, clothing the poor. And this was a major, and keeping track of German war crimes and making sure that the ghettos were filled with spiritual and cultural observance to keep the spirits of the people up. Then, however, when the Germans started deporting people to the death camps, the Jews started to realize, okay, this isn't just live to see another day. This is much more than that. We need to start, especially the young people in the ghettos, we need to start collecting arms. We need to start fighting the Germans. And they did. And there were uprisings, of course, in Warsaw, and in many, many other ghettos. They weren't successful, but they were still uprisings because it was impossible. You had the whole German army and the Gestapo arrayed against you. But at that point, the Jews really understood that they had to fight the Germans with arms. They started going out to the forest as partisans, and that would deny the forest to the Nazis and allow Jews to use the forest to hide and escape. And eventually, this spirit of rebellion reached the death camps. This was another thing that I didn't know. There were 7 uprisings in death camps. 6 were led by Jews. In Sobibor, in Treblinka, and in Auschwitz itself, there were uprisings. Again, they were not successful, but these uprisings saved many lives because in Sobibor, for example, the Germans closed down the camp and eventually the gas chambers. So thousands of Jews would have died who they didn't have the facilities to murder them. In Auschwitz, the resistors destroyed a combination crematorium and gas chamber that would have killed many thousands of people. So these were incredible acts of courage where no one expected to survive. They did it for the honor of the Jewish people. And that's what resistance was. Resistance was something that evolved from Amida, standing up against the Germans with unarmed resistance, to resistance with weapons, armed resistance in the forests and in the camps.
Well said. And I found your film very captivating, especially the readings of the writings. Could you tell about the how you found those writings and the narrators' voices? You brought in some special people for your film.
Well, the most wonderful thing is that the Shoah Foundation has recorded testimonies from many thousands of survivors, including the resistance fighters. And if you go on the website of, for example, the Holocaust Memorial Museum of Washington, you can find these testimonies, and they are amazing and amazingly beautiful. And they describe in graphic detail how they resisted the Germans. So we looked up the testimonies, and then we really had to really think about how we were going to present them, because you'll remember that the testimonies were given when the people were already old. But the thing that's so remarkable to me is that so many of the resistance fighters were young people. When I speak at colleges and universities or show the film then, the thing that really gets the kids is that these resistance fighters were their age. And they took upon themselves the burden of fighting for the honor of the Jewish people and of resisting the Germans, not believing they would survive, but doing it for honor and doing it to rescue other Jews. So this is really, so we had to really think about it. We decided we wanted to present these testimonies, these words of the resistance fighters as coming from the mouths of young people. We weren't really sure that it was going to work, but when we did, and when we got 10 really terrific actors and 3 fairly big names, which is Corey Stoll and Maggie Siff, both from Billions and many other things, but I knew them from Billions. And they played, Maggie was Vladka Mead, a resistance fighter in the Warsaw Ghetto. Corey Stoll was Abba Kovner, a resistance fighter in Vilna. And by the way, his family comes from Vilna, so it was especially meaningful to him. And Diana Agron, who read the words of Bella Hazan, who was an amazing Jewish courier who risked her life many times to rescue other people, including on the death march that the Nazis forced the inmates from Auschwitz on at the end when the Russians were about to take over the camp. And, just directing them and hearing these words come alive was just an amazing experience. And all 10 of the actors, I think, really felt, I don't like to put words in their mouth, but they expressed to me how honored they felt to be reading these unforgettable words from people who had done so much for their own people and for humanity by resisting Nazi oppression.
Most excellent. Paula, let me wrap it up with one last question. As audiences have a chance to watch Resistance, They Fought Back, what is the one most important take that they should walk away with?
Well, I certainly want them to understand that Jews did not go as sheep to the slaughter during the Holocaust. In fact, they fought back. And I think there is probably a lesson for everyone who faces oppression, that that fighting back is a really important step to take. And even if you don't think that you're going to survive, but the honor of doing that will outlive you. And I think that was an example that the Jews gave during the Holocaust, and it applies. And of course, they're not the only one. There have been so many genocides, and sadly, tragically, these are stories that we do not know, and we should know them because they are really inspiring, and they inspire us to do better to fight oppression in our own time.
Well said, Paula. Thank you very much for speaking
Thank
to us
you.
about your documentary, Resistance, They Fought Back. It is a captivating tales of resistance. So thank you very much, Paula.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.